Hello everyone, I hope you are doing good. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you everyone for recently joining me in my YouTube channel. I'm recording this video today on my user request. I've been asked for some interview questions which have been asked by a guy, and he want me to answer on those questions. So I'm recording a video, so this knowledge should be with everyone. And next time, if you are having those same questions, so you can ask you can describe or you can answer those questions very well in any of the interview. Yep. So we will wait for 2 minutes and then we'll start about those questions, and I will give you the answers and how would you respond on those questions when anybody interviewer will ask you those similar questions related to these scenarios. Yeah. So just wait for more 2 minutes and then we will start a video. And just in the meantime, if you have any questions right in your mind, if you think that I want to ask this also, please feel free to put your comment, and I will be looking at comment and will give you the answer on that also. And I would like to thank you all of those who recently bought my book. And please, if you have any challenges, if you have any questions, concerns, if you have any doubts, please feel free to contact me on my mobile number, right? And leave me a message. I will respond to you and call you back as soon as I can. All right. So yeah, I'm starting the video now. So I would like to tell you guys that I've been asked a question about the interview, right? A guy contacted me and he wanted me to answer on a question that had been asked to him in an interview. And the question was, so he said that he'd been asked a question that what is log4j vulnerability and how a SOC team mitigate this vulnerability. So these questions can be asked by any interviewer in any cybersecurity interview. This log4j vulnerability is just one specific vulnerability, but I will give you the answer of this also, and I will tell you how to handle the similar questions in any of the interviews very well, right? So for example, if you're going in a cybersecurity interview, right, and if interview asks us about the recently disclosed vulnerability or a 0-day, or like, let's take this one example only. Now, what is log4j vulnerability, right? So log4j vulnerability is recently discovered as a 0-day attack which was compromising all the machines running Java, and most of the devices in the Linux were including the Microsoft Windows also, were possibly disclosed and possibly vulnerable by the attacker in the internet. So sometimes we don't know, or maybe you have no idea what is this vulnerability, but how to mitigate any vulnerability, right? How to mitigate any vulnerability, that you should always know when you are going in any interview, right? If an interviewer just asks you about how you would like to consider to mitigate a vulnerability, right? Any vulnerability. So from the SOC perspective, right? SOC is a team monitoring the cyber attacks from a centralized point of view, right? So what SOC does, SOC monitors and provide the response. So for any vulnerability identified, for any devices, any framework, anywhere, so what SOC team does, SOC team identify that there is a 0-day, or if there is any other intelligence team involved, like threat intelligence team involved, they can send advisory or any third-party advisory coming, or any other news you have been read through. You can work starting in the mitigation. As soon as you have aware about vulnerability, how you can start to identify the mitigation. First, you have, if your company a SOC, if you're working in a SOC, and you can first mention that we will look for the vulnerable devices in your infrastructures. So you have to first mention the first step after identifying any vulnerability disclosed. The first step as a SOC, identify the vulnerable devices. How many devices are vulnerable, or there is no devices. If you work in a SOC, you will just report the incident to the VA team to do a scanning of the vulnerable devices if there is any in the infrastructure. And if they identified any vulnerability devices, then what you can assume? So maybe attackers may be targeted already, or they will target it later. So from the SOC perspective, we need some control here. What control? We need a control which can help us in the detection and the prevention. For any vulnerability, what are the basics controls we have? We have the controls for the IPS, we have the control for the WAF, we may have the control on the or HIPS if a company using HIPS, right? And how we can ensure these controls are in place? By ensuring the vendor have put a rule for those vulnerability in that database engine or in the signature database. So if you are working in a SOC, you identified any vulnerability, right? Your first action, identify the vulnerable devices by running a scan. Second, putting a rule, putting a preventive mechanism which can prevent any new attacks coming toward the vulnerable devices or any non-vulnerable device also, because attacker may not know what are these vulnerable devices and what are the non-vulnerable devices. So they do attack blindly. They might not sure if this device is vulnerable, but they will try to attempt to identify if that device is vulnerable. So you will ensure whatever the vendor controls you are using, example Palo Alto, if you're using any FortiGate, so you will ensure these all vendor controls having the signatures updated, right? And if any hits, if any traffic detected by those control, will help you to detect and to prevent any new coming attacks. Second step. Now if let's assume attacker have, maybe before you placing a rule, right, attackers have successfully exploited that vulnerability in a server. So what SOC team need to do now? SOC team have to perform threat hunting now to ensure there is no compromise or there is no attack observed before the controls. How we can do this? So for doing any threat hunting, you have two methods. One is based on the techniques used by the attackers, whatever the methods, what are the tools they're using, based on those you can do the hunting, or you can do it based on the IOCs. So as soon as any advisory is released, some big vendors also release the IOCs because they have already noticed that these many IP addresses are attempting or targeting the specific vulnerability. So you can also run a threat hunting for those IOCs. It might be based on the IP, it might be based on a specific string, it might be based on the domain hashes, it might be based on a specific file name. Whatever the IOCs you have received as per the advisory, you have to ensure that there is no hit from those IOCs in your logs. You have to check across all the devices, across all the data sources, sending logs to your SIEM console. So as soon as there is no hit, you are safe, and you can mention in your response that we have requested our vendors for the rule for detection. We have performed a threat hunting. We have also informed our VA team to identify the vulnerable devices. And as soon as the vulnerable devices are identified, please ensure or follow up with the respective teams to update or to patch those vulnerable devices as soon as possible. So might be they will take some time, because when any such zero-day discovered or identified, the companies cannot just put the patch on a production server. They have to do it on a first development server or testing server. If the works fine there, then they will go for the moving those patches in the production server. If you will talk in such lame, right, if you will talk in such a way of in the interview, that interview will be have a trust on you also, that yeah, you have handled such similar situation in your previous experience. It doesn't matter what do you know about a specific vulnerability, but how do you handle a specific vulnerability, it does matter for an interview. Because if I'm taking your interview or anybody taking your interview and you are giving a response step by step, it gives an understanding to the interviewer also that you have deal in the situation, and you can also work in similar situation if again trigger or if again comes to you. Okay, Now let me just go through the comments. So I will just ensure that if somebody want me to ask or to discuss on anything, I will try to cover on those points also. Yeah, so we have a comment, first comment from Akash Saxena. So he mentioned, hello Vikram, how are you? My question is how to answer the explain incident response procedure as per the use case of malware detected on a system. And okay, so thank you Akash for asking a question. As you have asked about the incident response procedure, right? So incident response, when it comes, so we have to understand, we never execute, SOC team never execute incident response procedure until there is a confirmation or surety that this machine is possibly compromised, right? So how we can identify, how we can figure it out that machine is possibly compromised and there is some doubtful of compromise or the IOCs or the attacker exist in our network. So for example, if anything triggered, right? And you mentioned about a malware detected. So if any malware detection on an endpoints, my mean to say endpoint is here, endpoint could be an end user device or a server, right? Okay, so let's take now example, if a virus or a malware detected on a user machine on a laptop, right? And now what type of the file it is, what type of threat it is, like it is just based on a few low priority threat, it is medium, high or critical, because AV also gives the severity and the priority of the threat type, threat name. They also mention you that this signature is belongs to that particular rat, that particular malware, adware, spyware, worm, trojan, backdoor, hack tool. The different types of malware are there. Depend upon the type of the trigger, depend upon the threat name, depend upon the severity, we take further action, right? Sometimes the users coming in office, they're plugging a USB drive or that hard drive in their machine, and those hard drives were already possibly compromised with auto run file, right? And then there's some other already infected file in that hard drive or the removal drive. It also triggers an AV alert for us. But do we need to follow incident response for that as well? Maybe not, or maybe if the device is belongs to the higher management or the senior management, then they would like to ensure that this machine is not further compromised. But if the device is belongs to some user in a company and that user is not working in a critical department, then yeah, we can just recommend, we can do a scanning of that machine and can inform the user that please avoid plugging in the USB drive without scanning, or we can inform the admin team also to restrict the USB connection for the limited users only. If you have limited user, just give the permission to those users only, not for everyone, right? So now let's talk about the incident response. So for example, there is a server and we identified there is a some type of threat detected which related to the some process dumping or like password dumping, right? We identify, like example, mimikatz. It's a good example. Mimikatz we can take. We identified a threat with mimikatz. So mimikatz, attacker used to get the high privileged accounts. They can dump the password, they can do the kernel string, they can do different various of attacks with mimikatz. And this is a hacker's tool, right? If you have any such critical alerts triggered for you in your SOC, then you are not supposed to close those alerts for sure, right? You are supposed to report those or to investigate further how this file is delivered to that machine, how this file is dropped to the machine. Maybe attacker have possibly compromised the another machine and had code connection, had connected with that new machine through the dumping of the passwords, a password in the memory already, or there is text file, there is a notepad file, we don't know. Maybe attacker have installed some keylogger there, possible reason. So we have to identify how this file is dropped. We have to look the source, how many users, IP addresses, machines connected with the different port numbers, because whenever you are connecting to a Windows machine also, there are different ways to connect. Some people directly log into the server with the RTP. Some people try to connect with a shared drive mapped to that. So we have to look possible connections have been attempted to connect the machine and who was the user at that time who logged in. As soon as it's a confirmed incident, then you can follow the incident response procedure for that, right? And the ones who have already bought my book, we are covering incident response in my last chapter, and that is very detailed incident response, and I And in that last chapter we discussed about like the different stages, like how we prepare, how we detect, how we identify what is the containment phase, what is the eradication phase, or the recovery and lesson learned, right? So these different stages works in a way. From the first, like how would you like to prepare? So preparation is like about to giving a user awareness, having proper controls for detection, right? Then identification, that you should look for like how many machines are compromised, because based on the different parameters or the artifacts you noticed in a compromised devices, you can look further on the facts if those exist on a different machine also, right? And as soon as you collected all these details about the compromised machines, about the compromised accounts, the IP address involved in these attacks, you can start the containment phase. You will ensure that no data will be exfiltrated from your device to the outside. Then you will try to eradicate, try to remove those kind of infection from your machine, right? And here's, I want to add one more thing, guys. When we talk about the eradication, that means we want to remove a file, we want to remove a threat, we want to remove a virus from a machine. Don't ever recommend, or don't ever say in an interview that, yeah, do you recommend you delete the file? We should not delete any file. You know why? Because deleting a file is not a good approach with my understanding. If you have any threat, that threat's supposed to be removed by the AV itself. If AV is failed for detection and removal or deletion or quarantine, select the sample, ask your vendor of that AV company, ask the vendor that we have this virus, we did our artifacts research, we identified this belongs to a malware and this is an IOC is connecting with, but our AV failed to detect this particular malware or threat. Then they will request you to share some samples, they will request you to share the file, they will do the reverse engineering, they will see what are the different connections being initiated, what are the processes being executed, what are the registry modifications have been made after execution of this file, and they will give you a new signature definition. No, the AV, not all AV can detect everything. Attackers are smart. They may try to upload their infection file on the virus total to see how many engines can detect those file. If attackers are smart, they will not give you a chance for an alert. They will try to evade, they will try to obfuscate the code, they will try to not giving a single chance to you for a notification, right? And that means if attacker will obfuscate the code of any virus file, your AV will fail for sure. But the thing is here, you have to make sure that AV should be updated with the new virus definition. And you can contact the vendor, you can ask, this is a virus file, we need a definition, a new updated definition. They will do some research, will come back to you, will ask you to update the AV in all your machines. And then you can do a sweep about those infection file, and whatever the files, even they have a different name, but I mean the connections, the behavior of the files are same, then AV will able to successfully detect it and delete or to quarantine those files, right? And then I will talk about the here recovery, right? Because maybe after, based on the your analysis, you have come to a point, right? Yeah, I did my whole detailed check and now I can be sure that there's no further infection. Now attacker is completely removed from my all devices. Yeah, so we monitor the device health also. After the performing this incident response steps, we ensure there's no further possible attempts should be triggered for that machine. We'll keep that IP, we'll keep that user account, we keep that machine under monitoring, right? And ensure when you are taking the backup, you should take backup pre, post or pre-compromise of that. For example, if the date is 2nd June of the compromise, then you should just take 1 week back and ensure that this compromise happened not before that, right? Otherwise there's no point, because if compromise happened on 2nd June and you're taking backup of 3rd June, there's no point. Attacker is already in the machine, right? And the last step about the lesson learned. What are the gaps you noticed? What are the things you noticed that need to be improved, should be in the place of the next time when this similar attacks or alerts will trigger or similar incident response will follow? That you will point it out in your report and you can mention there as a lesson learned items, and that will be your incident report on the particular incident. I think Akash, I gave a very brief on this incident response process. Now I'm coming to the second question by the Mohammed Ahmed. Hi Vikram bhai, please explain about the web shell analysis. Okay, so Mohammed Ahmed want to understand about the web shell analysis. Yeah, so web shell analysis. What is a web shell first, guys? We may don't know what is web shell. So web shell is a file which is delivered or which is dropped, which is uploaded by attacker to a web server as a backdoor, as a rat, as a command and control. So if I'm an attacker and I can upload my web shell to a web server, right? Let me just draw some pictures also for you that makes more interesting for you to understand. Let me just going back. Windows capture I'm enabling, guys, for you. Yeah, I hope you can see the whiteboard. If you cannot see the whiteboard, just let me know in the comments. I will check it out and we'll look what we can do for this now. Yeah, just waiting for 2 minutes and then we'll start for this web shell also. So I think this is not very full screen. Let me just stretch this. Transform, right click, transform, stretch to screen. Okay, now I hope you can see this whiteboard on full screen. Yeah, it's web shell. Just give me a minute, guys. Okay, I hope it's fine now. So let's don't waste more time because we're already running out of time. Okay, so what is web shell, right? So web shell is a file which can be uploaded on a server. For example, there is a server and you upload a file there, and when we want to make a server as a providing a web service, so we have to install by default as like IIS or as Apache services on this, and these particular services have different paths. For example, for Apache we have var www. For example, all the files coming under this folder directory will be going to the internet. So and attackers may try to access any files under this particular directory. For example, a.txt, b.txt. An attacker want to put some file, attacker will put the file only in this directory after that. So if attacker can put any file that is already now in your own server, and attacker if somehow try to access that file through the internet, attacker can send a simple GET request, and attacker can bind this particular website. For example, test.php. Attacker can bind this particular web shell with the Netkit, right? Netkit is a tool, as a like Swiss Army tool, we can say. It can read, write, it can modify the particular packets on the network layer, and TCP, UDP, it can craft packets for you. So Netkit attackers are using for listening out, to enumerate, to send a packet on different ports. Also attackers are also using for running a port scanning also. So attacker using Netkit to connect on different ports on the server, right? On a different port on the server, or if any connection coming back to the server, attacker can use to redirect on the Netkit on their machine and can execute CMD, PowerShell, or any other utility which exists on this particular server, right? They can use the Netkit to invoke any of the terminal exist. If attacker somehow got the access of a terminal, right, and attacker want to attacker want to further copy some files, attacker want to download some more further malware. So how we can do the further analysis on this, right? This is very important for us. So now, based on the behavior of that file, right, for example, test php, based on the behavior and how it's, I don't know how this file behave. Yeah, so when you are checking your is logs or the f5 logs, you will see there will so many get requests coming for this particular file only. An attacker may send some commands, for example, test.php $cmd equal to net user. For example, attacker can send command like who am I. Attacker can send command like what. Attacker can do some like net user account name, example test password and add. Attacker can do as more other commands. So these commands, right, these commands actually are important for you when you are seeing similar such kind of the request. When you're doing monitoring in a SOC, right, you should look at this command and you should know what each command does mean for you, and you have to cross verify or to correlate this command in the OS logs or in the ADR logs. If you can see these commands being executed recently, right, if you can find the, for example, this command will try to adding an account. If you can see this account is added, right, in your AD, then yeah, it's confirmed attack, it's a confirmed web shell attempt. Then you can look for this file, when this file was firstly created, and what you will do as a response, as an incident response process. So the first, as follow by incident response process preparation, right, we should have a control, we should have a proper mechanism for detection of these attacks. We can either create based on these commands, we can create based on the signatures by the IPS or any HIPS or the, right, and then if we have the enough use case, then we can move for the detection. We can look if this file does exist on any other server also. We can look further if this file does exist on the server of the same source IP address of the attacker trying to upload a different file on different server, right? And the third, once you identified the compromised server, identified the files uploaded, you identified the commands executed on the terminal, then you can further investigate in the EDR logs, in the in the Windows logs, or in the device OS logs level. Sorry guys. Yeah, so then you will correlate and identify if there is any impact, and identify if there is any impact, right? And now what you will do, you have collected all the details, but yeah, in SOC team does not have access to a server, right? You can now have to report this incident to your system team, that and to let them know, or in some cases, you may not see this commands at all because the attacker is sending through the post, and the post request coming in a body, not in the URI. If you're suspecting any file could be a possible web shell, how would you confirm if this is a web shell? Sometimes we request the systems team to verify if that file does exist, and if that file does exist, you just get the copy of that file and do the same, because this is now a kind of virus for you, right? And that means AV failed detection of that web shell. Do the same thing, like contact the vendor, ask them this is a virus file, we found this file and we need a signature definition. Then do follow the same process as we did in our first case. Okay, now I will look for the next comment, guys. I hope I try to answer this question also. Let me now just jump into that and we'll look for the next question, right? Okay, so the next comment is from the Sheikh Chinu. I faced two difficult questions. One is for log4j and another for phishing email. Okay, yeah. So as Sheikh mentioned about the phishing one, the phishing one is, guys, very common scenario in any interview of going, and you are not prepared for the phishing use case. Then I have doubt that interviewer might select you, because if you cannot handle a phishing use case in a good manner, then it's give a sign of suspicious that you haven't worked on these basics alerts, right? So any phishing which is delivered to the any exchange. So for example, you got the phishing from abc@xyz.com. This is a domain name, and you're running a company, for example, bob.com. This is your company website or company domain name. And if an attacker sending any email, the email will go where? To the exchange server, MX. If your company is using some control, say like email gateway, right? Any security control for checking in the email body, checking in the email header to find out if there is any certain thing suspicious. The email SPF records, DMARC records are well defined and it matches as per the expected sender. There is nothing suspicious in the attachment, then this gateway passes. If there is no email gateway, just remove this from our scenario now. So we are assuming there's no email gateway at our side. We just have the exchange application, for example, and email coming to your exchange server will be then delivered as a copy to the all different recipients, right? So for example, as Chinu mentioned, right, if interviewer is asking you if any email delivered to 100 of 4 users, for example, and what you will do now, right? The first step, what you will do, you have to check this email sent by this sender. Is it really threat? Is it really phishing? Because if it's asking or saying this is phishing, I don't trust. I have to check in the email headers, I have to check in the content, I have to check the attachment hash value, I have to check in the behavior of the file, I have to check the URL reputation, I have to check what URL shows to me when I visit the website. Based on that different checks, I will conclude if this is phishing or not. And yes, if this is a phishing, then I will ensure that how many users received this, how many users clicked on it, how many users submitted the credentials, how many users executed the file, right? If there is any file, again, it's very simple. You have the file, that is a virus, no signature triggered by the AV. Again, contact the vendor. This is, not every time maybe you are following this, but this is a good practice. And some companies follow this, and some companies maybe depend on the process. But it's a good old practice to mention this, that if you have any kind of virus on the endpoints, servers, end user machine, you have to ensure that your AV or your security controls will able to detect those files in the future. You can't just avoid this. You can block the hashes on the ADR to prevent the execution, right? But if there's no ADR, right, how would you ensure that this file not be delivered again by the same sender or different ID? You just reach out to the AV team, mention this is a virus file, I need a definition, this is a threat. And when they do the quarantine of any file, they take it already from your machines to their main centralized repository, and they do reverse, they get a different signature based on that. But if you don't have any ADR solution, if you don't have any options to block the hashes, then blocking and giving update your AV vendor is very good. Is very informative for them also, and for you also, to identify that these many files were undetected by the AV. For those many files, you have the signatures now, right? And you can keep this as a repository for you also, and to present to their managements. Any email delivered, check how many recipient received, check if anybody clicked on it by checking in the proxy logs, checking the ADR logs, check how many you submit the credentials, again checking the proxy logs, right? And if you find something suspicious, reset the account password, monitor. Okay, there's one more thing. If there is any phishing delivered, user opened a link submitted the credentials. You know what generally a SOC team or SOC analyst does? They just reset the account password. But additionally, you also mention in the interview, right? As soon as email delivered, user clicked, user submitted the credentials, you will also check that if there is no successful attempts from the outside, right? If attacker have the credentials, attacker may try to log in with the credentials. So you just mention this, and this will give a very good impression to the interviewer also. Yeah, you can think in that way also, that yeah, after a possible compromise, you will just don't just resetting the password. You are also verifying that there is no successful attempt, because just sending a request for the user reset password, account password, it may take some time, and then meantime attacker will come and open that account, will do another phishing attack from the same account, from same compromised account, will deliver some other phishing email to from your account, possible compromised account, to different user. To take all preventions, follow these steps. Yeah, and as soon as you find this all now clear out, you can close the case. All right, I think this is also a good brief. Let me go through the new comments, if there is any new comments. Okay, thank you for answering the question in detail. Can you please also tell me about how loopings attack happen step by step? I'm confused by reading lots of articles on it. Lolbins attack, I don't know what Lolbins attack, to be honest, but yeah, we will check on this. We can't see. Yeah, I hope you can see the screen. We are able to see your screen. What is the main difference between AV and ADS? Yeah, so first let me check what is this Lolbins attack. I had never heard about this attack. Let me just check it first. And guys, this is also a good thing, right? If interview something ask you, right, in interview, see, we are all humans, we may know something and we may not know something, right? I'm not saying I know everything. I'm always be honest. If I don't know something, I don't know anything that about thing, and I will not give you some wrong information on that, right? In the interview, if you are going and if we also heard something interview is asking about that thing you don't know, just simply say, yeah, I have no idea what is this. Yeah, you can mention if you can just give me some detail, or you can check it later after the interview, right? But don't just start giving some information if you don't know, just because this doesn't leave a good impression, right? If you just start just giving answer whatever being asked, it's not good approach also. Just answer what you know perfectly. So let me just first check on this Lolbins attack. Lolbins attack, let me see. Okay, I can see in the Google, I just mentioned the group used Lolbins extensively to carry out malicious activity with payload delivery, to deliver malware payload with extra stealthiness. Okay, so Lolbin is the living of the land binaries. Living of the land binaries are binaries of non-malicious nature, local to the operating system, that have been utilized and exploited by the cyber criminals. Okay, I got it now. I will give you best example for this. So you can just mention in any of the scenarios also. For example, let me take it. For example, let me just clear my screen. So as this Lolbin means living off the land binaries, and that means the binaries of a non-malicious nature, right? Local to the operating system. For example, let's take a simple scenario. SVC host, system account. SVC host is an application you may see running on the different operating systems. It has different properties to help operating systems, because there are different other executables, different other binaries which are local to a operating systems, which keep running in the machine, right, independently with any user interaction. They do their job as decided. For example, they are giving an interface to the user to connect in the internet. They are giving user privilege to connect in the network shares. right? As system, I mentioned, system is not a binary. System is an account being used locally by the operating system, right? There are system accounts also, like network services system accounts. So what are these accounts and what are these binaries, local binaries? So any account having the system privileges, right? That means system network services. So when attacker try to inject the malicious payloads or try to inject something, some malicious. So what is payload first? Because people are sometimes confused between the payload and the exploit also. Payload and exploit. Okay, first understand this first two terms. What is exploit and what is payload? So when I want to target a vulnerability, right, I have to select my exploit. With which exploit I'm gonna use, right? Which CVE code, which particular vulnerability I'm targeting, right? Where is my exploitation method I'm gonna use, right? As soon as I find the entry of with the exploit, for example, you exploited a vulnerability with a specific unpatched version of Internet Explorer, right? You find this and exploit that, right? Because that is vulnerable, and you just use the parameters to take advantage of that vulnerability. But what next? After exploiting a vulnerability, you have to deliver a payload, right? You have to deliver a payload because payload is the actual code which runs after the exploitation. So if you're targeting a vulnerability, exploiting it with this method which I want to select, like based on the any existing vulnerability, right? Any CVE you mentioned about any, for example, let's say example simple scenario, uh, Mozilla Firefox, right? Or VLC player or some other known applications having vulnerability, and that is being hosted in the internet, and the attacker tried to exploit it. For example, Log4j, right? We identified that Log4j having supported with the Java, and every possible devices was using the Java were possibly compromised, and attackers trying to test it and to verifying it, try to exploit it. But what after that? Attacker will deliver the payload. The payload is the main thing which will be delivered after the exploitation and which open a door for the attacker, right? So if attacker now entered in your machine, if attacker entered in your machine, and what are the key points you should look further, right? So for example, attacker want to, because PowerShell is a legit application, right? CMD is a legit application. SVC host is a legit executable. So these all executables are legit. But what if attacker will infect this? What attacker if attacker will start using these legit applications with the intention what they're not supposed to do? Okay. For example, I'm using PowerShell for downloading. If I get the control of a machine, I can use this particular PowerShell utility or the executable to run some other malware, to execute my payload, base64 encoded payload. I will use CMD for creating an account, right? So what attacker is doing? Attacker is not installing any other tool, because if attacker will try to install any other tool, maybe you will get another alert by your AV. But if attacker will try to use these known malicious binaries or the programs or the executables, then you may thought that, yeah, this PowerShell is being used by my admins also, right? CSV is a legit application. You will may ignore this, right? SCMD is a legit application. You may ignore this. But how attacker using this application is depend. We have to look into the ADR logs. Okay. Now was another question. What is the difference between the AV and ADR? Because to understand the functionality of the ADR, we should understand what is AV is doing. So if we take example here, AV and EDR, right? EDR. So AV just consider as any file. If this file is a bad, and in the virus definition of the AV will block this. If no, We will allow this. What you will get as a result, that AV identified this file is malicious, it is quarantined at this time with this user, with this IP, with this machine name. But what EDR gives to you? Endpoint detection and response, right? EDR will give you the access to see when this file, from where this file is dropped, who delivered this file, which account, what happens when you execute this file, what registry modification did, what are the IP address communicating with, what are domain requests being sent out through this. So EDR gives you the complete low level informations in the operating systems after interacting any application. EDR gives you the access to understand about the behavior of an application. So I hope, guys, I tried to answer you, right? So this is simple. Maybe you know something, maybe you don't know, but if you will just, for example, as Akash mentioned, what role based attacks, right? And if you don't know, right, maybe you can just ask the enter, because this is the way of asking the question, or way of, maybe you know this, but you, or maybe you don't know. So we understood the meaning of the role based, then it's very simple to answer that. Yeah. So cybersecurity is nothing, guys. Cybersecurity is just asking you something which you already know about it, right? There are few things I already told you multiple times: user level, network level, application level, and system level. You just focus on these 4 different level of attacks and scenarios, and just, if you are going in an interview, be prepared one use cases for all these different levels. Yeah. In my book, guys, I'm covering 30 use cases, and I have with other 15-16 use cases separately, right, where I discuss about different levels, where which device comes in a place, what actions we expect from a file, the controls, right? Because if you understand the flow, then it will be very easy for you. I will just share the last thought of my, and then we will just end this meeting. Yeah, just last thought. When there is any attacker want to target a user here, so what attacker have to achieve first? Attacker have to select a payload, the exploit that will travel through network, because whatever is sending through, it's going through network packets. So I can say green is for the network packets, right? And now maybe attacker targeting a specific vulnerability with this particular payload or exploit, then maybe attacker targeting a particular application. That is basically, for example, as I mentioned, simple. Don't confuse yourself also. Make and try to understand it with simpler terms, right? When I refer application, I will say example of the iChrome, right? The Chrome, Mozilla, Adobe, Word file, or any other known application, right? These are the Chrome, other applications. Okay, so you have to be understand about the attacks coming through the network layer, targeting through application, right, which can be detected through the system also, that is systems level attack. Let me just go here. Yeah, system, because if you're targeting a system vulnerability, if you're creating an account in systems, or if you're targeting a user, like credentials harvesting, right, user level, the endpoints, the AV files. So think in bigger scope, right? And then it will make very easy for you to answer. And when you're going in interview, just think these questions related to where it belongs to the network level, system level, user level, or application level. And then what just give a small description, and always give a straightforward answer what have been asked, and then give a brief on other topics if you're aware. Yeah. Okay, so I'm taking this last question from Stuti Jaiswal. Hello Vikram, if any end user machine is infected by a virus, then being a SOC analyst, what all steps do we need to follow to check if it is true positive or false positive? So as we discussed already, Stuti, I don't know if you missed this in the initially. If any end user machine is infected with a virus file, or it depends upon what type of threat it is, right? Because all AV having, when it generates alert, right, it generates give you the information about threat name. Sorry guys, it's long time I'm not writing, I'm not using this pad, and I think my way of writing is also now got worse. Okay, threat name, signature, severity, or IP, machine, OS. So you may find this all information from an AV alert. OS maybe or maybe not, but if you can get the OS information, that is also very good for you. So if threat name is, for example, let me just think about it. Okay, threat name is add.text, signature is AdAware, severity is low, IP of the user machine, for example 1.1.1.1, machine name again Bob 101, OS Windows 10. So you can see now, looking at this particular information, this is AdAware. AdAware, what AdAware means? The person when visiting a website, browsing internet, there are a lot of websites opened in the backend, maybe other advertisements being trying to run in your machine by downloading some JavaScript in your machine, by installing some cookies in your machine to track your IP location, to track your, the IP address of yours or the location of yours machine. So to this information, just to collect the information about the users visiting on their websites. AdAware is just for the advertisement purpose, but they can also inject some payloads which can track your activity, which can track your IP address, and some AV consider those activity also suspicious, because this is about this privacy. I don't want let others to see where I belongs to, right? So some AV triggers alert for the AdAware also, right? And then you will see the file name. If there's a file name, you can see the priority, and then you can check further the user activity. If you have something, this is possibly because of the advertisement, and you want to know what is that, you can check the EDR log at that particular time frame. You can check in the DNS logs at particular time frame, and you can use a website like urlscan.io. urlscan.io will give you the visibility when you access the website, what other websites are being accessed to, right? So you will see that this particular threads or this particular domain is being accessed when you visit the different websites. When you are accessing any, for example, number times, you maybe got a prompt of an advertisement. When you click on that, it may redirect to a different page, and that same time you get a trigger from the RAV. But do you think is it really suspicious? For me, no. It happens. It's commonly being happening every time. So we can just ignore this one time, but it's keep coming, right? It keep coming from the also the plugins installed in the Chrome, installed in the browser, Firefox. Those plugins also may advertise themselves, right? Then you have to further identify that this particular threat is either because of the net surfing, because of the plugins based on the threat name. And when every trigger signatures, every vendors have a page of information, what threat names means, how critical it is, why it possibly triggers. You can look for that also to conclude, yeah, this is nothing suspicious, and it is already quarantined. That means file is encrypted, nothing suspicious, you can just clean it. But if you got something like NBT scan, signature is like we can say scanning the network, severity is medium. NBTC scan attacker used to identify the live machines in their internet, in the local network, right? So if you found such of the threat in your AV, even if there's a user, don't skip it. Report it as a security incident. Identify the root cause, why this file is delivered, why this file being used. Might be the user is doing some PT, the user is authorized, user is an admin, user is something doing non-activity, but we want to understand why. and as soon as you will go to this file, you can either close it as a true positive or true positive authorized activity. Yeah, but false positive, if the threat is low priority, not a critical, not a kind of attack attempt, then you can consider as a false positive. Okay, and I think yeah, this is a detailed again brief on this particular scenario. Yeah, so let me just switch off back to the screen, and yep. So I hope guys you enjoyed this session. Yeah, I hope you like this session, and I'm sorry guys, from long time I was not able to record a video. Yeah, but I will try to continue this and will help you to learn something new in cybersecurity. And if you have any questions, doubt, concerns, please feel free to add your comments, right? We will check and we'll give you the update on that, and we'll try to come online as a live, right? And we'll record a video on that, as Sheikh Chinu messaged me and asked about these questions, so I thought it's good to go live and give answer on that, so it will be good for everyone, not just for one or two guys, but I will try to teach what I know with my experience, with my understanding, to all of my viewers and subscribers. Yeah, so I hope guys you like this, and if you doubt, let me know. Maybe we can have session later also. I will try to answer your problems if you have. All the rest, take care guys, good day, and enjoy your day. Bye bye, take care, and thank you for joining everyone.